when we met AD, I just cracked up because when she saw him, she took off running towards him, talking about, AD, I love you.
All right, Phil, you ready?
I am ready.
All right, Ty, you ready?
Always, Cap.
Timeout. Tyler, who are we sitting down with today?
Man, it's a much-needed timeout, ladies and gentlemen. It's the 3 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. The Mavericks are making a comeback versus the Cavs right now. Ladies and gentlemen, we have Phil McKibbin, the CTO of PRV8 and the previous CTO of the Dallas Mavericks. Phil, thanks for being on the show. How you doing today, man?
I am doing excellent, and I'm so excited to be here. And guys, thank you so much for inviting me to be on.
Dude, it's good to be on, man. And we gotta come out the gate, Phil. So the other day, dude, you sent me some photos, dude, of your wife and we'll just call them A-listers for fun. who and it's cool to me that you have your wife take photos with these folks. You know, you sit in the background, you take the picture, and you put your wife on center stage, man. Smart man. But who has she met? Who's her favorite person that she's got a photo with that you've introduced her to?
Well, I wish I could say that I was that smart that I had her take the photo. Look, it was more like she saw him, she ran to him, you know, and then every one of those dudes clowned me like, hey, like AD was like, hey, little fella, take the picture, you know, or when she met Usher, you know, I'm standing there and he like looks at me and he goes, hey, man, you in my light. Could you move? You know, and I'm like,
Yes, dude.
you know, and then after about 30 seconds of him holding her very tight, he looks at me and says, hey, man, is this you? I'm like, yes, that's me, you know, freaking 45 years. That's me. But hey, he was cool, though.
That's so funny.
Look, she is an amazing person. And when we met AD, I just cracked up because when she saw him, she took off running towards him, talking about, AD, I love you. I'm a Cali girl. And I'm sitting there looking at this going, what in the world, you know? And he smiled and he hugged her up and everything. And that's when he was like, hey, little fella, take the picture. You know?
Okay, well,
So-
let's say AD for now, man. And Kevin's
AD.
a Kentucky fan.
Kentucky
so we're coming
fan,
full
yeah,
circle
so,
right here.
yeah.
There you go. A good dude, really good dude. We're going to miss him in Dallas. I wish that he would have been able to be healthy and to really show his talent because, you know, I've been a Laker fan for many years and he was awesome with the Lakers. So, you know, good dude.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
I mean, we got close. I think he won the national championship for us. Or was he on the? Yeah.
Yeah, they did. They
Yeah.
did. So.
Yeah.
Can you believe that guy? He was a point guard in like high school. Did you guys know that?
No, I did know that. I mean, you could tell because of his handles. But if you got past his unibrow, that was what everybody used to rag on him for. And I was like, yeah, but he just put up 28 on you, so who cares?
Well, you know, I don't blame him for being like, I'm not playing in Washington. You know, I get it. You know,
Yeah.
been there, spent time with the franchise. You know, they got a lot of things that they need to do, you know, to bring their program up. Hey, I feel for him. Hopefully he can get somewhere else. So
You seem like a sports fanatic, Phil. You enjoy sports. Who's your favorite athlete of all time and why?
oh boy. My absolute favorite athlete of all time was Muhammad Ali. But I mean, hands down. I mean, as a little boy, I would go, you know, sit next to the radio and listen to his fights. And I remember when he lost his first fight to Joe Frazier, I just cried and the world ended for me, you know. But he was my favorite. You know, but there's so many unbelievable athletes that I follow and love. You know, when it comes to football's running backs, a lot of great running backs, but I have to give it up to the late Jim Brown. May not be the best human being, but was one hell of a football player. Because when you go back and look at all those tapes, and you're just going, "Oh my God," seeing him just run through people, and the prototype running back, power, speed, strength, quickness, amazing.
Yeah.
And then I
Watching some of
gotta,
those videos, you think everybody else is in slow motion, or it's like a high schooler, a senior playing against middle school kids. It's like,
yeah, it
this is
definitely
the-
looked like that, But I also got to give it up to Barry Sanders too, because that guy was a cheat code. There was
Yeah.
nobody like him.
Dude, Madden 95 through 2000, that was the Lions, guys. I remember
Oh
so
my
many
gosh.
random quarterbacks like Gus Frerotte, Charlie Batch, just because I played with the Lions and like delisting quarterbacks, guys. If you guys need any info on Lions quarterbacks, it's just because I played with Barry on Madden for like 7 years in a row.
Oh yeah. He
Well,
made a lot of good Thanksgiving games, man. I mean,
he did. He
that
did.
was unbelievable.
Well, look, I got to give a shout out, to my fellow Trojan, Rodney Pete. He was a great college quarterback. I wish that he would have been a little bit better, in the NFL. But Rodney provided a lot of great moments, in the Coliseum. So
That's cool. I just read this when you brought up Muhammad Ali, and I just reading this book on like visualization and the power of it. And when they had a quote from him, and it said, "I believed I was the greatest before I even ever was."
yeah, yeah. I mean, I remember talking to my parents about him beating Sonny Liston, and my parents knew Sonny Liston. And they said that guy was the meanest, roughest dude, they big time thug they've ever seen. And for this young guy to get in the ring with him, just the audacity of him, doing it and then just outclassing him, showing his superior athletic ability and boxing skills, and just beating him down, So Muhammad Ali, I got a chance to meet him one time, and when I was at USC, and it was just magical. I think my wife has met him as well, but that guy was incredible. Truly an inspiration and a hero for mankind. I mean,
Absolutely.
when he was going through a lot of his challenges, the world didn't want to acknowledge his greatness. But for him to take a stand and to say, look, this is who I am, this is what I believe in. And even if you strip me of all my titles and my money, I'm going to stick to it. And there's very few people like that to this day that would be willing to give it all up, for what they believe in. So major kudos to him and his legacy.
And I learned that as a kid too. My dad had a book and it was signed by Muhammad Ali. And it was just globally loved. I feel like universally, everyone got behind the guy. I think, right?
Yeah,
and you don't see every walk of life getting behind one human anymore. I think everyone's so divided. And so I've asked my dad a few questions about it, and I got the poster, right? The Sonny Liston poster. Everyone's got the poster, Sonny.
Yeah.
But
That's right.
Phil, when we were talking, your involvement in sports, and anytime I meet someone who's been through 2-a-days or the weight training or just getting your butt kicked and finding out strategies to take down a 5-star, they always transfer so well in business. I feel like. Where do you see the I guess the correlation for you? Say with doing the 2 days and practices and strength training and all that, and then you're behind a desk, right?
Yeah.
Like where do you see where that's helped you in your career?
Oh, no doubt. To have the discipline and the fortitude to get up every morning, jog about 3 miles to school for an 8 a.m. practice. And I remember where we used to have 3-a-days. But when I got to college, that's, we did the 2-a-day thing. And I'll admit, I used to sit there and go, I don't see the value in this, However, as a much older person, look, it builds character, it builds strength. It teaches you to test your limits. And then when you find yourself in corporate America, look, you face some of those same challenges. You sit there and you go, can I really do this? And is this worthwhile? And then you find yourself going through the monotony of the day to day. And it's very similar. When you go through 2 days, 3 days, I mean, it's torture. And a lot of times, especially early in my career, you're having to be there, 8, 10, 12 hours a day, and it's drudgery, but once you learn to get past focusing on the clock and the time and focusing on the mission and focusing on doing the work, that time flies. And for me, the biggest challenge is how do you turn your everyday job into something special? And a lot of it starts here. You've got to be willing to put in extra time to grow and learn. And I'll challenge anybody, especially a lot of young people, that my daughter's a perfect example. I love her to death, but she's like, I don't understand why I'm not the president, of the company. And I'm like, you can be the president of your own company. That's probably the best path. But outside of that, you will become the president when you put in the work and you prove yourself and you learn and you grow and you learn the business and you learn to generate revenue and you learn to do the things necessary, to lead. Because one of the toughest things is to lead men and women, and especially during tough times. It's very difficult. So, but you got to learn it and you got to go through it.
Yeah.
And was there one coach you have in mind that taught you a lot, Phil?
Oh boy.
Like coaches are my number one when I look back at my life. I'm like Tom Olson. No one knows him, but he taught me everything. And Benny Bridwell, done.
Mm.
But who are your dogs, man?
Oh my goodness. My high school football coach, Wayne Cooper, was amazing as a human being. Really taught me to put in the work, taught me to hang in there, taught me about family. My coaches were always like father figures to me. So Wayne Cooper was very special. And then I'm going to say my track coach, Mark Whitaker. Mark Whitaker trained several Olympians. And I remember him taking a look at me one day and he was saying, by the time you graduate, you're going to be one of the top hurdlers in the state of Ohio. And I'd never run hurdles before, and here I'm a junior, and the guy who had been running hurdles for our school was, an all-city champion, really fast guy. And I remember the first day we were at practice, of course, the dude smoked me, you know, but every day, I just kept getting closer and closer. And then finally, when the light bulb turned on, Coach Whitaker was like, look, stop long striding. You need to learn to get your knees up and chatter your feet, and you need to not be afraid of the hurdle. I need you to learn to lay out on the hurdle. And once that happened, by the time I was a senior, I ended up breaking our school record that had been in existence for 30 years and had the third fastest time in the country, you know, and that was actually coming off of the night before I went to the prom. And look, you're supposed to go to the prom and get in early in the morning, but it didn't happen that way. I ended up taking a girl who was the sister-in-law of one of my coaches. And oh man, she was rough. She was like missing her boyfriend from Minnesota, and she's telling me, "I will do you a favor by going to the prom with you." And all she did was talk about her boyfriend the whole night. And I remember telling my coach, "I will have her back by 11." And she was so mad when I pulled in at 10:59 and was like, "All right, here you go, get out," And because I was like, I'm gonna be in bed by 11:30, and I got up the next morning at 6, got to the school, and my event was the first event, and it started at 8 a.m. And at the time, I ran 14.3 and 110-meter high hurdles. And then the following week, I came back and ran 14.1.
Phil,
You
I
know,
don't even know if I could do that with no hurdles.
Gosh,
you,
yeah.
you know, look, the reason why I mentioned Mark Whitaker was because he was so no nonsense. He was like, look, if you guys keep winning and you get to the state, I'll take you to dinner. So for that was a big deal to us. And the day that I ran 14.1, we had a torrential downpour. And right before, the gun was to go off, so they paused the meet for 3 hours. And me, like an inexperienced dummy, I just kept going. I was like, I'm not going to stop. I'm just going to keep working on the hurdles. And I've never been able to wear contact lenses. So I always had to wear my glasses. So my glasses fogged up. And when we finally ran the race, I'm in first place when I got to the seventh hurdle, and I'm beating the dude who, was the national champ. And I happened to look to the side, and I could see he really started pressing. So then I started pressing. And then when I got to the eighth hurdle, I clipped the eighth hurdle, stumbled. So I went from first to fourth in one hurdle. And then I tried to catch up, with the next two hurdles. And by the time I went over the 10th hurdle and we got to the tape, one of the guys just leaned me out, and they took the top three to go to the state, and I was fourth. And that is a moment that I think about all the time. It's funny because a few years ago I met Joe Montana, and I'm talking to Joe, and I'm like, Joe, man, you're so great. And what was that one defining moment? I'm thinking he's going to say, yeah, in Super Bowl so and so, when I brought, the team back against the Bengals, that was my moment. He's like, nah. My moment was, he said, I like basketball better than football. And I was a better basketball player. And he said, we're in the state championship. We're playing a team that we had beat by 30 or 40 points earlier in the year, and I got in foul trouble, and the game was tight, and we ended up losing by a couple points. And he says, I think about that every day. And he said, when I be out on the football field, I think about that feeling that I had when we lost. And he said that would motivate me. And little did I know that he was spot on, because I still think about, hurdle number 8, you know. So hey, it is what it is, but that's driven me to be a better person, a better athlete. When I coach, my kids, and I've coached kids and young men from the little 8-year-olders all the way up to dudes that are in the league. And for me, it was always use sports as an opportunity to teach life, So it was always about, hey, there's going to come a time when you're going to lose your job. Somebody's going to get sick. Things aren't going to go well. And you got to dig deep. And you've got to stand up in the midst of that adversity and say no to that adversity. And you got to power through. And there's countless times in my life that the very words that I've spoken, I've had to lean on, because look, faith comes by hearing. That is a biblical principle. Now, the word says faith comes by hearing, hearing the word of God. But if you think about it, if you hear good things, you're going to think good things. If you hear, you can do it, then you're going to believe and have faith that you can do it. And that's really one of the reasons why every team I've ever coached, my teams have always done well, because I try to break it down and relate things to life, especially those moments that are difficult and tough. And I found I'll take 11 average 2, 3-star guys in a heartbeat over 11 5-star. Now that sounds crazy. Talent wise, those 5 stars are off the chain. But if those guys don't play as a team, I don't know how many times I've had teams that we've gone into cities and beat down far superior teams because we were disciplined, and we were focused and we were motivated. And it was us against the world. You
Yeah.
know, I still remember the day that I was coaching my son's high school JV team, and we were going up against an undefeated team, and we're basically playing to make the championship. And I'd always been doing different things all season to help motivate the kids. But that week of practice, I decided to tell them the story of King David. And I start talking about, imagine this little dude going up against this 6'7" ish giant that everyone was scared of. And I start talking to them about what are the giants in your life. So one day at practice, I pulled out a pail and I pulled out a rock and I said, this is the giant that we're going to slay. And I put a rock in the pail. And then I encouraged them every day. I want you to go find a pebble, find a rock, and I want you to put it in the pail in front of the team, and I want you to call out that giant. I want you to say, you know, this giant is fear. I'm gonna have dominion over fear. You know, this giant is a lack of talent. We're gonna put that in the pail. This giant is, you know, I'm struggling at home. I'm struggling with my grades. And every day we put, you know, those rocks in the pail. And I told them when we get to the game on Thursday, this pail's coming with us. Now, by then, that freaking pail was heavy. And I took it out on the field and I told them that team we're playing is undefeated. They have a number of guys that are going to be all state. We have 0 guys that are going to be all state, but we're going to beat them and we're going to find a way. And we're playing the game. The game, I think it was 7-6, and they're driving, and they get down to our 3-yard line, and they basically, if they wanted to, they could have just took a knee, right? Because it was 1 minute left, and I remember calling the timeout, and I gathered everybody in, and I said, I want y'all to remember this pail. Remember the sacrifices. Remember all the giants that we slayed. We're going to find a way. And timeout was over. Next play, they pitched the ball to their all-state running back, and one of my guys comes up from the safety spot, delivers this massive hit on him, strips the ball, takes off down the field, scores a winning touchdown,
Oh
time
my
runs
God.
out, we go to the championship, you
Oh
know,
man.
and it was all about faith. You know, and I mean, there's several instances very similar to that
Yeah, and
where
Phil, real quick, let's break some of this down real quick. All right. I
sure.
know Kev's eyes or ears are burning. So Kev, fire away, dude, because I kid you not, Kev just sent me last night, I think, a David and Goliath Bible verse.
Yeah.
Mm,
But yeah,
Yeah.
Kev, I know Kev's humming. What do you got, Kev?
Yeah, no, I
That's a
love I love what you said, Phil. I think I come back to a lot of the things where you talk about discipline, focused, motivated.
yeah.
But I go back to what you said about Muhammad Ali against Liston, right?
Hmm.
That element of no fear, right?
Yeah.
I think is what I've realized is by faith, right? David, I think Goliath was standing out denouncing
Yeah.
Israel and talking about God, and this guy that happened to just be a shepherd just literally walked out and was like, "Who the heck's saying that?" And I
Yeah.
got a problem with that. And
Yeah.
as all the best, warriors were just sitting
Hmm.
there and taking it.
Yeah.
And to me, I've been so moved by the people in my life, like you said, that have this belief in me, which then became a belief in self,
Hmm.
which then enabled that success.
That's right.
And and I love that when you said that from a coaching perspective. I think the best coaches that I've ever had saw something in me that I couldn't even see, and then you start to really believe it.
Yeah. That's true.
But without that belief and without that tape that you're playing in your head, I think that's really what helps quiet and silence those noise.
Mm.
I wanted to kind of go into because I'm an athlete. I grew
Hmm.
up playing sports, and almost at some points that also becomes like your identity. At least it did for me,
Yeah.
right? Like I'm good at life because I'm good at this sport, and if I perform well at this sport, then I'm worthy, I'm valuable,
Hmm.
right? Then talk about that transition, right? You talked about the value of, but then I started to realize that how much performance spoke to my validation, right?
Mm,
So then failure in business was even scarier, right?
mhm, uh-huh,
And talk to me about that transition for you, because it is a big one where you outgrew where, hey, the game, right, or
mhm,
the sale or whatever it might be, is not the pinnacle. It's about the actual learning and growth. Like one of our past guests said, you either win or you learn.
uh-huh,
That took me a while to understand that concept, because I went from sports into sales. And then I was like, holy shit, well, sales, if I'm at the top, then yeah, I
mhm,
mean, nobody can question me, right? I'm safe. I
uh-huh,
looked at performance almost as this element of safety,
mm,
because I could control that.
mhm,
Talk to me about your evolution, like coming off the football field or the basketball court and really getting into work.
mhm.
When did you start to redefine your definition of success?
Very good question. Um, I am on a continuum of trying to perfect my craft daily. Um, Being in corporate America, owning a business or whatever is no different than being on the football field.
Mhm.
Same stuff. You have challenges, you put in the work, you train. You go against opponents that may be better than you. You know, you definitely learn. You learn real fast how to deal with someone faster than you, stronger than you. But the most important thing is not to give up and to constantly be focusing on how do I block better? How do I catch better? How do I run my routes better? How do I tackle better? It's no different than how do I write this code a little bit better? How do I um, comment the code so that the people that have to test it and the other people that may have to pick it up can know what I did and keep moving forward? Or you find yourself in a situation where the business needs to increase their revenue generation. And all the old traditional ways to do it just aren't cutting it anymore, and you have to start finding new ways, or you need to start looking at leveraging technology to improve processes, or to, make things go faster, or you now being able to leverage, AI to do some of the tasks that would have taken you many, many, many hours to do, that you now can do in seconds, and have the discipline to be able to not just accept what's kicked out, but to review it and go through it and make the corrections, and to lead. All these things are basically the same. It's
Yeah.
just a different field,
Yeah.
you know? In my career, I was very fortunate to have a number of people impact me. I remember many a day going, I'm doing the work of this manager. Why am I not the manager? I'm outperforming this director. Why am I not the director? Oh, I should be a VP. But in retrospect, I had to go through the things I needed to go through to build myself up. No one's just going to step out on the field and just be great. Somewhere along the line, they had to train, they had to learn. Now, they may have God given talent, but what happens when you go against somebody that has just as much talent as you or more? So, in the workplace, you come in, you got to, as a young person, humble yourself that these people have earned it, typically, that are there, and that you need to take the time to learn. And I'll say this, I was fortunate. I always go back on how I ultimately became a CTO. That was in the work, 30 years earlier, not realizing it. And then I had finally got up to the point where I think I'd become an executive director, and I ended up going to ESPN, and I met a guy who was my new CTO at the time. And I still remember when that guy walked in my office and said, "Where's your boss?" And I'm like, "I don't know." And he's like, "Who the hell are you? What do you do? And why should I let you keep your job?" I
Wow.
thought that was the funniest stuff I ever heard in my life. I did. I laughed. I was like, Let me tell you who I am. I even had the head bobbing and stuff. I do this, I do that. And he was intrigued by that. He couldn't believe that I like brought it back to him.
Yeah.
And then, we're talking and he starts asking me all these questions. And 2 hours later, he's like, I'm gonna come see you tomorrow. And he came to see me 4 days in a row. And all we did was talk about the business. Now, here, this dude is the head of technology and ultimately became the head of technology for all of the Walt Disney Company. But he saw something in me. And day 5, he says, I don't want to talk. I have a proposition for you. And I'm like, yeah, well, what is this, sir? He's like, I want you to be my second. I want you to run the technology portfolio. I want you to run a $285 million project. I want you to be my guy. I want you to talk to the CFO because I don't like talking to that guy. So I want you to do it. It's true. And and then what he did was put me on a path. At the time, I didn't understand it. He was like, okay, I'm going to put you over app development. And you're going to do that for about a year. And in 30 days, I want you to come back and tell me what's wrong. And then I want you to come up with an execution plan on how to fix it. So did that. Then he put me in QA and I had to lead that. Then he put me over infrastructure. Then he put me over architecture. And little did I know, he was preparing me for all of the tenets of what I would need to become a CTO. Fast forward, I had done the ESPN thing for 8 years. I was working with the Dodger organization with one of their youth programs. It was the head of technology. That assignment had just ended. My phone rings. I'm looking at my phone and I say to my wife, I don't recognize this number. And she, as beautiful as she is, says, dude, you better answer that phone. You need a job. Talk to these people. So I pick up the phone and the guy on the other end is like, hey, is this Phil McKibbin's? And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, is this the same Phil McKibbin's in a meeting 12 years earlier? The meeting with David Stern tells him everything you said was crap. And I bust up laughing and I'm like, yeah, that's me.
That's me, dude.
And he's like, we've been following your career.
Wow.
We think you're ready to be the CTO of one of our NBA franchises. Dude. Now, all I heard was NBA, and I'm living in LA, so I'm thinking Lakers. And I go, yes, Los Angeles Lakers. I love LeBron. Oh my God, I can't wait to get started. I'm just going off. And the dude is laughing. I mean, he's having a riot laughing. And he says, Phil, it's not the Lakers. And I'm like, wait a minute. I'm thinking and I'm like, okay, I'm in LA. It must be the JV team, the Clippers. At the time, they weren't really winning much. So I said, okay, it's Clippers. I'll take it. And then I said, wait a minute. George Hanna, good friend of mine, he's a CTO. He didn't lose his job, did he? He's like, no, it's not the Clippers. So I'm going, well, who is it? And he says, it's the Dallas Mavericks. And all I could say was, oh. Well, stop talking. And he's like, you're not excited? I'm like, no. And he said, well, Phil, we think you're ready. And I said, look, timeout. You need to understand something. I used to live in Houston, Texas. At that time, 25 some odd years ago. And my wife came to live with us with our newborn son. And she lasted all of 3 weeks in Houston. Because when that humidity hit her hair and her hair went poof and turned into an afro, she's like, I'm out. I'm never coming back. And I said, look, she made me promise that we would never move to Texas. So I'm like, yeah. And then he's like, well, we would love for you to interview. And I say, sure, fine, I'll interview. 19 interviews later, they're like, we want you to come to Dallas and bring your wife. And I did. And when I came, I met with St. Marshall, who was the CEO at the time. And she just said, look, I've got one question for you. that's going to determine if you get the job or not. It's either going to be the fastest interview you ever had or the worst. Nah, it's up to you. So I say, well, you know what? May I, I said, well, what's your question? She says, tell me your leadership style. And then I look at her and I say, well, can I tell you a story? She's like, sure. So I said, my leadership style is like this. I said, I used to be assigned to a fast attack submarine that just happened to be named the USS Dallas, young officer. And we were in the Caribbean prospective commanding officer drills, and we engaged the Soviet sub. And they thought we were being provocative, so they fired their torpedo at us. And I will tell you, the many, 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 many hours of training, you are not ready for it, and you don't know how you're going to react until you're really in it for real. And all I remember was being stricken with fear. I was the guy who was in charge of damage control, and all I kept thinking about is we're going to die. And I was like, you haven't gotten married. You haven't had any children yet. I think I was 23 and I'm freaking out. And all I know is that I've got 20 men looking at me, because what ended up happening was Captain maneuvered us around. The torpedo hit a canyon wall, and we ended up sustaining some damage. We had a slit in the hull. It was about a 2.5-inch slit, real tiny, but you're underwater, you're in water under a lot of pressure. So the water is just rushing in. All right. We maneuvered around, shot our torpedoes at them. Unfortunately, they didn't make it, but we made it. But we're now in a situation where we are racing against time to save the boat or save the sub. And when I reported to the galley and those 20 men showed up, I'm sitting there going, I don't know what to do. And all I could do at that time was pray, because I'm thinking, you haven't had children, you haven't gotten married. They're not going to say you died in combat. They're just going to say you're missing at sea. No one will know. And so I decided I just got to pray. And I looked at the men and I said, there are no atheists in foxholes. I'm not going to proselytize to you, but I know you all believe in something. I don't care what it is, whether it's the universe, Buddha, God, the paper towel, it's up to you. I'm going to pray. If you want to pray with me, cool. So I started praying, and God is so wonderful because he gave me a vision so special. He gave me a vision of my children as adults. I hadn't even made them yet. They were still swimming in me. So they were nowhere near. It was years before I had kids. And I saw them as adults with their children. And I went from total fear to total faith, because I was like, Father God, you've always shown me the truth. So you giving me this vision, I knew I was going to be fine. And afterwards, I told the men, we're going to have 60 seconds to get in that space and secure the hull. Let's go. And I took off running, and they were running behind me. We get to the space, and I'm thinking, I look down into the space, and there's a lot of water, and I'm going, oh man, these guys are not going to want to go down in that space. So I looked at them and I said, let's go. I climbed down into the space. And when I climbed down, my feet hit the pavement. The water was at my knees. I said, stopwatch is going. We got 60 seconds. Men climbed down. They went to the space. They pulled out their mallets and their big cork. They actually do that. And we're hammering to get the thing in. I count off time. It's 30 seconds. The water is now at my waist. We get to 45 seconds. The water is at my chest. And I'm like telling everybody out, everybody out, everybody out. Everybody climbs out. I'm the last person. By the time they get out, the water is now over my head, and I'm trying to tread water. And I just got real calm, because I was like, you're going to be fine. And I remember being underwater, and I lifted my hand up, and the men pulled me out. And when they pulled me out, um, we laid on the pavement. We looked at each other. Then we started yelling and screaming. And then we laid back and started doing snow angels. I do not know why we did that, but we did. And we're singing and carrying on. And then the captain comes over, the one MC, and he's like, Mr. McKibbin's come meet me in my stateroom. And it wasn't until I was talking to you the other day, Tyler, that it hit me because I kept saying, "How would he know?" Then it dawned on me, duh, they had cameras, so they were watching all of this. So I went to his stateroom, and the first words out of his mouth was, "Mr. McKibbins, what in the hell were you doing? What were you thinking? Don't you know we paid $2 million or 2.5 to train you? Send the men in there." He's like, "They're expendable. You're
Wow.
not." And I was like, "Sir, in all due respect, I did what I thought was best." And I said, "The reason why I did it was how can I send a man to his death if I wasn't willing to give my life for him?" And I said, "They would not have gone down in that space. But when they saw me do it, these are the guys I went to boot camp with. These are the guys that I told them in boot camp 6 years earlier, I want to be an officer." And then lo and behold, I come back and now I'm an officer and I'm put over some of these same men. So I said, they needed to have faith. So that's why I went down. And he's like, all right, well, don't do it again. And I'm like, if the same situation occurred, in all due respect, I'd do it again because they needed to have faith. And he looked at me, he said, "We'll talk about this at dinner tonight," and which we did, with the whole, officer crew. But I finished that story. I look up, Scent has a tear in her eye, and finished with saying, that person that went down in that space is the type of leader that you're going to get. Someone who's going to put it on the line every day, give their absolute best. And I do want the job, and I'm ready to lead on your behalf. And she's like, "So when can you start?" And I'm like, "When do you want me?" She's like, "Monday." Now this is Friday, and I'm going, I'm out. I'm catching the plane Sunday to go to Hawaii, to spend a week there with my wife. So I can start the following Monday. And basically that following Monday, I'm in Dallas. I flew out, got there late Sunday, was there early Monday morning, and the journey began, but that journey, like I said, really began all those years ago
Yeah,
of having to learn and grow and make mistakes and to keep, perfecting your craft. So,
love it.
and now to tie it back to the football analogy, that's all them days of practice, all those days of two-a-days, all those film sessions, all those getting cursed out when you miss a block, you know,
Yeah.
or or you have to deal with the dread of watching the film with your teammates while the coach keeps clicking back and forth. See that tackle you missed, McKibbin? See that? Look at your feet. See that? Look, and that stuff sticks with you. So, but it's no different. It's no different than dealing with a system that fails and trying to make sure that that system gets up and running, or troubleshooting some code or having to refresh a database. It's the same stuff. The only difference is you're using your mind a little bit more than your physical body, but it's really no difference. And when
Well,
you can see the parallels, then it becomes a little easier.
and Phil, I love how you think, man. Like, because I think a lot of us get so wrapped up in the job,
Yeah.
and and I used to miss all those tangibles outside the job that correlate right to the job, for
Yeah.
me at least. And I always think it's fun working for a leader who's not just obsessed with the one thing we're doing,
Yeah.
and someone who takes care of the. And the older I get, the family, my family means everything,
Yeah.
and I keep hearing you talk about your wife. Valentine's Day is coming up here, man.
Oh,
I'm sure you're going to do something awesome for her. But how do you teach, someone coming up in their career to keep that? I hate to use the word balance, but just the know-how to not just get so honed in on this one craft in life and to explore everything and to also know that all these other things help you with this thing.
Yeah,
It sounds like
yeah.
you nailed that, my man.
Well, look, I've been very fortunate. I've had a number of people in my career that have helped shape me, and I'm thinking back on I was working at DirecTV, and I was put in charge of a five nines project. So it's a project for availability where you tune the systems where they stay up. And five nines basically means that you'll have less than a minute or so of unplanned downtime for the whole year. So your system is always up for the most part. And I'm leading the project, and I've got these vice presidents and these senior directors, that I'm having to work with, and they're not cooperating. They're doing their own thing. And things are just going bad one day. And the guy who was the deputy CIO calls me in, and he's like, how's the project going? And I'm telling him, it's terrible. That's happening. That's happening. And then he looks at me and he says, McKibbin, you were former military, right? I said, yeah. So he said, what was the worst day of your life in the military? And I told him about when we engaged that Soviet sub. And he looked at me and he said, so today, did anybody die at the job? I was like, well, no. He said, Phil, it's only TV.
Yes, dude, that's what I'm talking
He's like, you're going to get up tomorrow. You're going to have the same problems. You got to keep going. It's a marathon, not a sprint. And when he said that, this gigantic weight was lifted up off of me. And I stopped tripping that these people were 4 and 5 levels above me. And then I started focusing on the mission because he kept saying, how did you overcome your fear? How did you do? And I said, what was the mission? He said, focus on the mission. So I say this, that I approach that now. And that was one of those pivotal moments in life because at that moment I started to realize, Phil, you've done this before. The work may be a little different, but you've been in harm's way. You've been in difficult situations. You're bigger than this. You're greater than this, and I really started going, I am the leader. Even though I'm 4 levels down, I need to lead with integrity. I need to lead with love. I need to be fearless, and I need to be bold, and I need to be forthright, and I need to lead with love and integrity. And that's what I started doing. Project turned around, and little did I know I was building the foundation, for a phenomenal career that I've had. And I'll tell any young person, put in the time, build your foundation, because a strong foundation will allow you to have the tallest building on the planet. A weak foundation built on sand is going to crumble. Everything's going to crumble.
Dude,
So,
Phil, that reminds me of last night I was watching hoops and
mhm,
Kansas, Peterson was out.
mm,
I think he's out just because he's a little prima donna, to be honest. I think,
mm,
but there's this kid named Council on KU. He's from Rochester, New York, up where
mhm,
Kevin
mhm.
is. And he's not the number one pick coming up.
Yeah.
But I think I know I heard a story last night, like 6 weeks ago. Mr. Council told the whole team he was going to lead them. And
Mm,
he ain't no number one draft pick like Peterson, man. I mean,
mhm,
what hit me was exactly what you were kind of talking about. You don't got to be at the top to lead. And
mm,
it's just so cool to me to hear stories like that. Like my hair stands up. Like
mhm.
Kevin knows that I would rather beat the heck out of Ole Miss next week than make a bunch of IT placements. And that's what I
I hear you.
I
I
would rather
hear you.
strategize, and that's just how it's in my blood, right? But like
Mhm.
when I heard this council dude took charge of their locker room
Yeah,
6 weeks ago with the number one draft pick in the room, I
yeah.
was like, that's a dog right there. I'm like, I think the kids need to know you don't got to have the title. And me and Kev have
Mhm,
realized that when we first started this, we were title chasing, we didn't know better. I was
mhm,
nervous as hell talking to folks like you, Phil.
mm.
And we found out, just like you said, man, we're on this little blue ball together. Ain't nobody dying.
Yeah.
Half my customers are like serving people corn syrup, in their product, I'm like, come on now. Like, we're like, it ain't that serious, man. Like, we're making people fat, at the end of the day. And their blood pressure going up with your product, and I'll tell them that, and they'll just start laughing their ass off. They're like, dang,
Mm.
Tyler, you know what? You are
Yeah,
right, dude.
Yeah.
I was like,
yeah.
yeah, put real sugar in your stuff, dude. You know, stop with this fake stuff. But man, I could probably talk to you all day,
I
Phil. Hey,
know.
Kev, what do you got? I know Kev's firing over there.
No, yeah. I mean, I wish I'm looking at the time. I'm like, holy cow, it already went by this fast. This is Phil. I mean, if you haven't written a book yet, I would tell you that's probably definitely on your journey at some point because I think when you slow down and look at like the journey, and it's similar to what I told Tyler. I think for the longest time, I thought I was driving the bus, right? I thought I was telling where the bus was going to go, where I was headed next. But each time, I think it gets back to that faith conversation.
That's right.
It will come, it will look entirely different as to what you expected.
Yeah.
So I always write down even before today, right? No fear, right? No expectations, no judgment, right? Have fun. Those helpful reminders, but the biggest one that I needed was faith is greater than fear, right?
Yeah.
And love always conquers fear too.
Very true.
But I'm amazed to see somebody at your level have no fear in talking about their faith because I think it for the longest time, like maybe it was just me growing up, but it wasn't. People didn't really talk about it much, you know. It was like one of those subjects, just like politics, that was really off limits. But to hear somebody share their testimony in these precise moments that at the time I'm sure you had no idea of what it would be creating to set you up for on that foundation to then come back because I haven't smelled ego on you, right? I haven't smelled pride. I haven't smelled some of those things that I think are accustomed to people that have gotten to positions to your point without the foundation. Like they kissed ass to get there, right? It wasn't their hard work. They worked off the backs of others, right? And then they took credit for their work. And that's really where the question that I was going to ask you is because you talked about like I caught myself taking pride in doing really good work. And then I was upset when there was feedback, right? Or that isn't that good, and here's why. And then that doubt starts kicking in. But your seed of not only faith but belief in yourself is strong, and I think that's just the reminder that I hope all guests get to hear out today. That you'll have mentors and sponsors that will water your seed, but at the end of the day, unconditional love really only comes from one place, whatever universal power to your point that you believe in. But if you think it's you, that's where I see a slippery slope, and all of a sudden you don't listen to feedback, you take things personally, and every rainy day is happening to you. So I really appreciate all the things that you shared. I go back to Saul, you know, the king that was in power, that was the mad king at that point, right? He had it all, and at one point he had faith in God and knew it was God and gave the glory to God. But at a certain point, then becoming king got to his head.
That's right.
And I think that's really what David was selected at that point in time by God, because there is this beauty in I think childish behavior, right? And I think the word naive, right? I always heard it as like bad. It's almost a blessing, right? Being naive and being curious and having a beginner's mindset is giving yourself that grace that you will fail, you will trip, you will fall, but it's all
part of the
setting you up
process.
on this. Exactly. It's all setting you up for this bigger move that you can't even see yet. You can't even fathom yet. It's a door that you never even thought that you would ever knock on. So I love this conversation because I hearing somebody at your level being willing to be vulnerable and share some of those things is different.
Well, I will tell you, both of you gentlemen, this, that you cannot have the testimony without the test.
Bam.
Has
Love
to
that.
come. And I share my faith because it's about legacy. It's about teaching others that want to learn, that want to hear, that want to, find out what else, they can do. And the bottom line is, look, you're talking to a guy who has overcome a brain tumor. Uh, and and when I opened my eyes after that surgery, the young man who I coached who became the starting quarterback of UCLA is sitting there holding my hand. I didn't even know how he knew about it. And he's like, Coach, you mean so much to me in my development and my growth. I needed to be here for you. You're talking to a person who, at the age of 55, finds out that he was adopted. His mother tells him, "Oh, by the way, you were adopted." And I'm like, "What?" You know, and having to go, nothing's changed.
Mm.
I'm still who I am. You were still my mother. You still raised me. You're talking to a man that's been with his wife for 45 years and have gone through every up and down imaginable. And that woman is still by my side and gives me strength every day by being who she is. And you're talking to a guy who has 2 children that he's fathered and 200 children that he's coached, that he's treated as his own kids. And that's why I've got dudes that are in the league now that still call me, like, "Hey, coach, should I take this contract? Should I do this and that?" I'm like, dude, I'm not an attorney. And but no, I want to know your perspective, coach. What should I do? Or a guy that's calling me saying, my wife left me. What do I do? And I'm like, you're going to get up, you're going to dust yourself off, you're going to go kiss those kids, you're going to tell those children that you love them, and you're going to tell them to keep loving their mother,
Mm.
and that you're going to operate in faith, and you're going to operate in a position of love, not anger, not hate. You're going to keep going. These are, to me, this is no different than 4th and 1 on the 1 yard line. It's the same stuff. It
Yeah.
really is.
I
Yeah.
love hearing this, Phil, because
Yeah, hope, right, is I think
Yeah.
one of the hope and faith, and
Hope and
I mean,
faith.
without it, yeah, I was in places of despair, right, like
Yeah.
not believing that it could get better. But
Yeah.
I'm
Very
walking
true.
away hearing you say, when you do things for other people, you find out who you are.
Oh,
And
truly.
I
It's
somebody that
never, it can't be about you. It's
exactly
gotta be about the team, the people, the
the
mission,
mission, like you
the
said, yeah,
vision. That's what you focus on. When you
yeah,
stop worrying about what award am I gonna get, and one of the things I loved watching my son play football, and he got up to extremely high level. And I don't know, time and time again, I'd see that guy put his team on his back. The most humble dude. You would never know he was who he was. I remember his head coach telling me one day, because I was going to come see his game, one of his college games. And the head coach told me, "Hey, now, when you get to the game and you see the Myettes, I don't want you to freak out." And I'm like, "Myettes?" And he's basically saying, he called the girls that followed my son the Myettes because my name's son was Jeremiah and his nickname was Maya. So he said the Myettes are going to be there. And when me and my wife got there and we saw all of those women in those number 9 bedazzled jerseys, and they cheering and screaming, and one young lady comes up and tells me, says, "Hi, Dad, I'm gonna marry Jeremiah." And she starts telling me his stats when he was in high school, and I'm just sitting there going, "What in the world?" And seeing this guy sick, hurt, and just grinding and leading his team to victory and willing them to their first league title and leading them to their first appearance in the NCAA tournament. It was because of all those early morning practices, all those running sessions, all of those, lifting, all those, film sessions. I give you an idea. My wife coached football with me when our son was little. And that woman was a beast as a coach. Oh man, she was good. Because once she learned how to read film, she would tell it like it is. And that's the thing I loved about her. She had no fear. I remember we're playing in the semifinals of our league championship, and we're down by 3 touchdowns or something. It was bad. And I'm like, I looked at my defense coordinator and I tell him, I'm like, "Dude, fix it or I'm gonna take over." And he's sitting there not doing anything. And then my wife comes up to me and she says, "Look, it's real simple." I'm like, "Well, what do you think?" She's like, "Huggies is just getting beat." You got to take Huggies out. And I'm like,
on the sideline.
oh, and Huggies is the son of our defense coordinator. Now you talking about bold. So I said, well, what would you do? She's like, we need to shut the line down. We need to put in Max because we had a kid that's Leanne Womack's nephew. We coached him. And then we need to put in this other kid. And then you need to move Maya and put him at nose guard. And we went from 3 touchdowns down late in the third quarter to winning by 3 touchdowns
Oh my
because we
God.
started wreaking havoc. And the thing I loved about what she did there was she was willing to speak truth to power. She was willing to be honest and to tell her like it is. And she was willing to make the changes that we needed to make for the team to be successful. And that was the epitome of selflessness. And then we go on the next week and destroy a team, win the championship. But the thing about her, she's a football mom. She's a football coach, sweetest person you'd ever meet. But she speaks the truth. And that's the thing I love about her. She's going to tell it like it is. And I like having people around me that are going to tell me the real deal. Don't tell me what you think I want to hear.
Yep.
Tell me the truth,
I think
And
there's so many leaders that don't, they're self-centered or self-conscious, right?
That's
They
right.
have insecurities and
Very
but
true.
I love how you put that. It's
Mm.
not about me, I think is that greatest. It makes life so much easier,
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
when you are the focal point, it makes life challenging. All right, one last quick question because I'm
Sure.
always interested. What is Phil's daily intention? Like, what is that mantra that you play in your tape? Because like to me, that is going to tell me all of the magic or some of the magic that's really in your mind. Because what is your daily intention?
When I get up, I usually thank God for another day. And I asked him to speak through me. I asked him to allow me to be a living witness and example for others. I go to the job. I'm dealing with people that are not on your same page, people that, make mistakes, and you have to love them up anyway. I'm dealing with people who don't believe I should be there or think they should be in that position, but they haven't put in the time, work, energy, effort, education to get there, and you still gotta love them. I go to work and I deal with colleagues that are jealous of my abilities. And, the thing that they haven't learned is you always want to surround yourself with people smarter than you. Because when you get to that point where you can lead them and that you're okay with them being talented or more talented, it's going to make everybody better. I remember the same CTO used to tell me that the toughest thing about being a CTO is the politics. 'Cause this is the technology. It's the guy that hates your guts, that jealous of what you're doing or mad about something and they don't like the fact that you're shining or whatever. But the sad thing about it is a lot of times people don't realize that, like with myself, I'm not there to bring the attention to myself.
Mhm.
I'm there to focus on the mission. If the attention comes, great, wonderful, but it doesn't go to my head, you know, or people worry about you gaining favor. And it's like, just worry about doing the job. Everything's going to take care of itself.
Mhm.
So for me, is I get up, I ask God to speak through me. I focus on how can I get better today?
Hmm.
Look, it's no different than, let me get to the gym and put up my 1,000 shots.
Now we're talking the same language.
The
That's it. Yeah,
same
for sure.
concept is let me get into the batting cage. I know that I struggle against a sinker, so I'm going to take 200 sinkers, you know, and then I'm going to make sure that either the pitcher or the pitching machine is going to give me a lot of movement so that because I've got to see it before I do it. So I've got to be to the point where I can look at that ball as it is just coming out of that pitcher's hands and know the hand placement and know, okay, that ball's probably going to be in this area. So I've got to get my bat in this particular position at this particular time. There's a young lady that I know who is a silver medalist with our Olympic team, great softball player. Remember when I was with EO1 Sports in the Dodger organization, and I had designed a technology cage that we use, batting cage. It was highly teched out, did a whole bunch of cool stuff. And I remember Nomar Garcia Parra was there, and he was trying to teach his kids how to hit. And it was hilarious because, you know, trying to explain to him, bruh, a prophet is not respected in his own land. You're dad to them. You're not Nomar Garcia Parra, you're dad.
Yeah.
And he's just getting so frustrated because the kids weren't listening to him. And my good friend Amanda Chidester walks into uh, the academy that day. She's in high heels, this gorgeous woman. And she's like, "Can I hit?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." She walks in the cage, high heels on, picks up a bat. She says, "Crank that bad boy up." You know, she's hitting hard balls. She's like, "Put it at 90." She's like, crack, smack. The ball's going everywhere. She's like, "Tell me where it's gonna go." Nomar's looking at this, and he's just like in awe, and his kids were like focused on watching her.
Cool.
And the kids are like, "Well, I want her to teach me." And of course he's pissed, you know. Then she says, "Phil, crank that bad boy up to 95." She took her heels off and she's really mashing now. And I'm looking at her and I'm loving the moment because I'm going, this woman is a master at her craft. And we ended up creating a concept that we call virtual coaching, where she was in Chicago and we had a feed tied into our training academy. We had a college player in there, and that college player had her yearly average was like she was a 220 hitter. Amanda spent 1 hour with her breaking down the mechanics, pitching, hitting, ball placement. By the time she finished, that young lady said, "I learned more in that 1 hour than I had my entire life as a batter." The next year, this woman ended up being conference MVP. Her batting average was like now 320. And she said, that one session changed my life. To me, that is the essence of being a professional and learning your craft and openly sharing it with others. Same thing in the boardroom, same thing in the classroom, same thing at the job. You want people that are givers, that are willing to share and spread that information to others. And then you need to have people that are willing vessels to receive it.
Mm-hmm.
Dude, Bink, you nailed it, Phil. Phil, we could talk to you for like
This was
90
awesome.
hours.
Hey, just bring me on the next session. We can do that too. You let me know.
love
We
to.
continue.
We will, man. And we are at the top of the hour, and this
Sure
went
thing.
by so fast. Usually when people are like an hour, I'm like, just wait, man. It's gonna
Yeah.
fly by. But just for all our listeners, Phil McKibbin's, look him up. He's the man. Phil, thanks for being on the show. And I'm
Thank
almost
you.
sad we got to wrap it up. And I got we text now, Phil. We're friends, okay?
Hey, we're buds. That's right. That's
Okay,
right.
and I'll see you when you come to Frisco. Me, you, and Renard will get some dinner or something.
You know, I was talking to him yesterday, and I was like, "We need to go to EG Steakhouse because that's my jam." And he's like, "Bet." And yeah, we're gonna make it. We're gonna make it work. For sure.
Well, everyone,
For sure.
ladies and gentlemen, Phil McKibbins, we're signing out.